program. It has three referenced using namespaces: system for general I/O, system.data for file I/O to a large extent, and system.data.sql client, which is the SQL Server namespace. And the first object we create is the SQL connection, which directly references the SQL Server namespace SQL client. And that's instantiated as an object called SQLCon1. And we set the parameter or the attribute connection string to a connection string that we derive via techniques that I describe in previous lessons, and I'll show you how to look at those lessons in a little bit. Then we do the open method on the SQLCon1, and then we create our second major object, the SQL command, which is SQLCom1 as opposed to con1, and we set the attribute of connection to the SQLCon1. So we associate our connection with our command object, and then we give it a command text of select asterisk from AB type. AB type is a table and within the collection database that we're using for our current application. Then we create our third major object, which is a SQL data reader, and call that audio book type. And we establish it by making a call to a method of the SQL command, which is execute reader. And once we do the execute reader to create the SQL data reader, we go through a while loop that does the read method of the ADO book type, which is our SQL data reader. And we read in two fields for each record, type code and type. And you notice the way they're referenced is that we have audio book type, square bracket, double quote, type code, double quote, end square bracket. So that's the format for referencing a field within the current record of the read method of the SQL data reader. And we write this out to the console with console.write. Then we close our connection, and we do a console read line, which actually does a pause if you're running it by double clicking the program, but we'll be running it in the DOS box, so it's really unnecessary here, but it doesn't hurt. And this is the information I need in order to write this program: the table information, table name and table fields. And as you can see, there's quite a few tables I've created via SQL Server Management Studio. And I also created this information about them through SQL Server Management Studio using this command. Select table name, column name, data type, and so on from a system data table called information schema.columns. And the way in which I use this is described in previous lessons once again, and I'm going to show you where to find these lessons on my website, www.dougteaches.com. I reference the table names that are like a %, because all my audio book tables start with an A, and none of the other tables start with an A. So it's a nice way of just getting those tables. And this is the connection string, which actually I just took previous connection strings and modified them in order to access the tables we want to access. And I created a user with limited access that can only access those tables for security reasons, and a user ID of Alexa, password of Anna. In order to find notice the first trick I use is the navigation shortcut of TR, which takes me immediately to the directory that I have these programs in. It's called type read. And if I do a directory, it'll show these programs. First, the text file that has the information we were looking about the tables and the fields previously, and then the type read.cs, which we want to compile by typing CSC for C# compiler, type read.cs. That creates an exe type called type read, and we type in type read to run it. And as you can see, this outputted the code numbers for the book types, and also the linked distinction of the book types, like 1 is science fiction, 2 is horror, 3 is Travis McGee, and so on. And those are all outprinted by this while that does the read on this, or the SQL data reader object. Well, I hope you learned a lot from this lesson, and